Welcome, folks, to another episode of Beyond the Numbers, a Wellers production. I am your host, Chris Thompson, and today, as ever, joined by my esteemed colleague, the tax knowledge that is Tom Biggs. Here we go again, Tom. It is closing in on the budget. Thanks for joining me.
Well, Chris, good to see you, as ever.
And we have a new Labour government that came in over the summer, and a new Chancellor in Rachel Reeves, first female Chancellor. And the first thing she did was she identified a 22 billion black hole in the public finances per year. And then today, just as we're literally about to record this, she says actually she needs to find about 40 billion in the upcoming budget. 22 billion was just to stay still in terms of public finances, 40 billion to do whatever it is they've got planned. I think you and I can probably surmise that most of that 40 billion is going to come in the form of tax rises. Yeah. So, on that note, Tom, what are those tax rises likely to look like? First one up, employers' national insurance.
Yeah, so there's been a lot about this in the press, certainly over the last couple of days. Obviously, Labour's pledge is very much that they're not going to increase tax for the working people. So seemingly what they're going to do is they're looking potentially to increase employers' national insurance. Now, whether that's through an increase in the rate or there seems to be talk about national insurance on pension contributions, it's sort of yet to be seen, but that certainly seems within their sights. So effectively the workers, in theory, won't have an increase in NIC, but the employer would.
Right, and there's been a huge amount of debate in the press about what are employers working people, but anyway, that aside, and there are question marks about tax incidents with that, and where does that tax ultimately end up getting paid?
Yeah, exactly right.
Is it shareholders? Is it clients, customers, or is it actually less employment, that kind of thing? But anyway, we'll leave that debate to another day. Brilliant, thanks for that. Number two, capital gains tax. Big one, this one.
Yeah, so again, there's been a lot of speculation about capital gains tax, and this is one that within their manifesto they didn't really talk about, and certainly didn't suggest that they wouldn't increase it. So a lot of talk about capital gains tax potentially aligning with income tax. I think it was last week that they came out and actually said there was talk about a 39% rate being introduced, and the Labour Party came out and suggested that they didn't recognise that, and it was, I think Sir Keir Starmer said it was way off the mark. So whether it gets up to that level or not is to be sort of decided, I suppose, but certainly an expectation that it would increase. Now, what we might also see is a restriction on some of the reliefs. So, for example, there's been talk about business asset disposal relief, or entrepreneurs relief as it used to be known, as being scrapped. Be a pretty extreme measure in my view, given that it encourages entrepreneurship and that kind of stuff. So, you know, I'd be surprised if that went. But there also seems to be a suggestion that PPR, which is the exemption you get when you sell your main house, could be restricted as well. So, yeah, whether that's, for example, introducing
limit.
Possibly like a value limit, maybe. Right. Above which you then pay capital gains tax. So that may or may not come in. But
on any gain in the value of your main
which at the moment is completely exempt without limit. So maybe they could look at that possibly as part of the capital gains increases.
Gosh, quite controversial stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. And talking of controversial stuff, number three, one that everyone despises in some way or form, I'd suggest, is inheritance tax.
Yeah, so this again is something that I don't think was in their manifesto, as sort of kind of been mentioned, and they certainly not suggested it wouldn't go up. It's interesting that this is potentially within their sights, given I think we've spoken before about the fact that the thresholds and the nil rate band has been frozen since 2009, I think it was.
We've done a few videos.
Yeah, yes. So there's effectively been an increase since then anyway, given rising asset prices. But anyway, we're sort of staring down the barrel potentially of inheritance tax increases. So how that might look, again, it's open to debate, needless to say, but we might see things like, for example, the IHT exemption on pensions being looked at. Currently, typically, pensions are outside of your estate for IHT purposes. There's also the possibility that certain reliefs might, again, be restricted, similar to what we just spoke about capital gains tax. So business property relief, for example, which gives you effectively exemption on certain business assets. That might be restricted. So, for example, at the moment, AIM listed shares qualify for BPR relief. So we could see that particular exemption goes, given that effectively they're listed shares. Something like agricultural property relief, APR, again, that might be restricted so that it's focused more so on active farmers, if you like. So it might be a restriction on release. Also, what we could see, again, speculation, that the gifting allowance could be looked at. The annual exemption, for example, could be increased, but the limit on the lifetime gifts you can make might be restricted. So sort of tinkering in the rules, if you like, but nonetheless an increase overall in inheritance tax, I suppose.
Gosh, all these very relevant to our clients, and thinking of which, you covered it slightly earlier, but number 4, pensions tax changes.
Yeah, so again, quite a wide range of measures that could be looked at here. So some of which we touched on the inheritance tax exemption, so they could have a look at that. There's been talk potentially of restricting the tax relief you get on making pension contributions. So obviously there's two sides here. There's making pension contributions, the money going in, and then there's money coming out, effectively how you withdraw your pension and what happens there. So been talk that there could be a restriction on tax relief you get going in.
Yes.
And again, that's kind of been on the cards a little bit for a few years now. So it's not a sort of new discussion. Again, I think there was talk recently that they would probably look to rule that out because of the effect, I think, on the public sector. But there's no reason as to why they couldn't say there's a restriction, but actually public sector is exempt, for example, maybe. So we could see the tax relief being brought right down to the basic rate band of 20%, or possibly as talk of a sort of hybrid rate of 30% maybe. So that'd be quite a big cut and a big tax raiser as well in terms of how much they'd make from that. On the flip side, as we said, money coming out, potentially they could look at the moment you can withdraw 25% tax free from your pension up to a threshold of, it's around about 250,000, just above what used to be 25% of the old.
So it used to be the old joke of draw down and buy yourself a Ferrari or a Lambo,
if you like. Yeah. So that 25% at the moment is restricted to the limit that used to be the lifetime allowance, 25%. I think it's around about 250,000, give or take. So they might reduce that down. Certain people are a bit worried that could go completely. I think it'd be a bit of an extreme measure personally, given obviously people have planned with that in place. So probably if it does come in, more likely a restriction on that amount that you can draw down on. Again, the lifetime allowance could be reintroduced, which is effectively a cap on the amount you can have within a pension, and then subject to a charge later on.
Quite difficult to administer. We had all sorts of problems with doctors and surgeons who were going over that potentially and then not working. And
caused issues before, and I think previously the Chancellor before the election, I'm fairly sure that she kind of ruled that out. I think she backtracked and suggested that they wouldn't look to reintroduce it. So less likely. I'd probably more. I'd suspect the higher probability would be going into pension, because effectively that wouldn't affect people that have planned with the rules as they are.
Yes.
So any one of those, but more likely going in, I would say.
Brilliant. Okay, and then finally number 5, an interesting one that we haven't really talked about much in the past: ISAs.
Yeah. So ISAs at the moment are quite a good tax planning tool. So effectively at the moment you can put in 20,000 a year into an ISA, whether that's cash ISA or stocks and shares ISA, and any growth or income from that is tax free.
Yes.
What has sort of come about over years since ISAs have been around is that a lot of people have saved quite heavily into them, and we've now got what people refer to as ISA millionaires. So they've got huge figures sat within these tax free wrappers, and then obviously the income from that isn't being taxed anywhere. A measure that could be introduced is some sort of cap on the amount that you can have in an ISA, similar to the pension lifetime allowance.
Lifetime allowance.
Yes, similar concept. So you have a restriction on the amount you can hold in there that is then effectively in that tax-free wrapper. Anything above, may be taxed, or perhaps there's some sort of charge. But again, some sort of restriction on that the ISA regime, given how I think I read somewhere that it costs about £5 billion a year. I think that the sort of ISA regime. So some sort of restriction there might raise a bit of.
So if you're looking to find 40. Could be an area that would be targeted. Okay.
Yeah, possibly, yeah.
Now, not all of these may come in this budget. We have had this in the past where we've done predictions, and actually things have come in following budgets that we've predicted. So keep your eyes peeled. Let's see. If you like this video, please do like, comment and subscribe. Till next time, till the budget, toodaloo.